Okay, welcome back to The Long Shortcut, the podcast where two founders, myself and James, we talk about what it's really like to build a business, talk about the ups and downs of a different aspects of the startup journey.
Yeah, so I think today, a topic that probably I think everybody who's been in the world of work is interested in, which is office work, hybrid, remote. It's a big topic at the moment. Um, I think maybe just to kind of start really, if you, Owen, were looking at a job spec for a new job that you're looking at, and that job said office based, how do you feel about that?
Oh, probably skip and move on.
Okay, interesting. Interesting.
Yeah.
Why?
I suppose I look at my role and, what I can offer if I'm going to be office based is going to be very limited. Uh, I think there are certain roles that can be office based or field based or a mix of both. And there are some that, by their very nature, should be in front of customers or partners, and therefore office based is not an option. If you're in the office, you're not out there generating revenue.
I mean, you're looking at it from the sales angle. I know
Very
obviously
true.
there's different types of salespeople. Um, okay, so I mean, your role, your specialism, at least today, is COO, fractional COO type work.
Mhm.
Um, as a COO, just think of yourself just in the employee perspective. Does a COO need to be in the office? Because I mean, you mentioned sales,
Yeah.
great, but
But, depending on what's the nature of the company, I think the COO could be office based or could be a hybrid mix. That said, I think that the team under the COO could generally work more efficiently in a office environment. The collaboration aspect, the being able to discuss things in person is a much better, much more effective way of working as a team than remote. We all fell into the remote work, a lot of us through the whole COVID scenario.
I mean,
And we
I think forced, not fell, but yeah,
true. But I
yeah,
think it
pushed
it opened up
into it.
it opened up new tools
Yeah,
and new possibilities, but that didn't necessarily mean they were the right way. And yes, you can be effective, but I think you lose aspects of that team, the culture, the camaraderie, you know, everybody pulling together to get stuff done. You lose that on a remote basis.
yeah, but I mean, that's interesting that you say that because um, some visions of an office, there's like this cliche of the cube.
Hmm.
It's a big room with kind of soft partitions that are maybe, I don't know, a meter and a half tall or whatever it is, just a bit lower than head height so you can peer over them. And you've got maybe 20, 30 people on the floor, all in their own little cubes. To your point about the camaraderie, I think there is a stereotype, and I'm thinking about movies like Office Space, for example, where people are just kind of locked in their little cubes. It doesn't feel particularly sociable in that particular space. Yes, sure, you're in a room with 25 other people, but you're all in your own little world.
Yeah, and I think in those cube scenarios, it was very difficult to have that camaraderie. It lent itself into that whole conversations at the water cooler.
Yeah,
It's that was it. But I think, many of the office spaces that I've worked in over the last years, or many of my partners that I've gone into their spaces, the barriers between individuals, they're gone. You're sitting at a desk and there might be a small partition at the end of the desk about the height of a laptop screen. And that's the partition. So it makes it very easy to just, see that somebody next to you is off a call and you can just lean over and go, would you mind having a quick review of this document for me, or whatever it might be, or ask a question. I I see that aspect of the collaboration and teamwork and camaraderie working really well.
I definitely miss that part of it. When I ran into 10 years ago now, one of the highlights of my day was leaving my office and walking past all the people working, and then to having those conversations with the team, especially the designer. I was particularly attracted to whatever the designer was doing because it's visual work, and you can see like the logo in different colors and that sort of thing. That's definitely the bit that I miss of going to the office. But look, this is a podcast about startups. You are building a startup. Well, I mean, that's not fictional. That's true. You're building a
That's
startup.
true.
I'm building a startup. Inevitably, in any startup, you need to start hiring. There is that initial decision with that first hire that does that lock you in to a hybrid remote office-based decision right at the beginning, even before you've got a team. Because let's say your business plan is to be office-based. I would think it's not practical to be office-based when it's just yourself. I would say most startups, okay, I'm going to make up a number. I'm probably going to be wrong. 99% of startups start in somebody's home office, bedroom, garage, whatever.
Yeah.
Okay, whatever the number is, it's probably
safe.
up there. Exactly. That's not a controversial, guess at that point. But the second you hire employee number one, or assuming you're employee number one, employee number two, if you want to be office based, that's a real difficult decision. Because if you know you want to have an office, you then need to kind of hire people in that kind of location, right? Otherwise, you're going to have to let that person go, or you end up in a difficult spot.
Yeah, and I think it depends. It depends on the nature of the startup. I think budget is a key consideration whether or not you're going to go office based or not. Once you make that decision to go office based, then you have that cost, and there's a much bigger overhead per employee to have them office based. So for many startups, they avoid that. They go down the remote worker route from day one because that's what the budget it dictates. That said, one of the first things I did when I set up Barefoot was I rented an office and we put the team in the office. And it was more because we wanted to work at speed. We knew we had to get the product out to the market fast, and therefore we needed the marketing team together, we needed the admin team together, we needed the warehousing and logistics team, albeit the warehouse was a separate building. We needed all of that together so that we could work fast. And it worked really well. It was a small office. We were literally sitting on top of each other. The desks overlapped nearly because, the budget said I could only afford a small office. Therefore, in a traditional scenario, it was probably a 4-person office, but we've managed to get about 10 people in there.
Oh, wow. Was that a popular decision? I mean, that sounds great if everyone's like all batting on the same team and, rowing together, but not every day is like that. I can imagine that must have been a quite unpleasant time sometimes. I don't know.
Occasionally, especially when there was challenges from different individuals. It just made for testing working environments, probably an easy way to describe it. But that's part and parcel of any company is working through those challenges. And, we shouldn't, in a startup situation, you shouldn't shy away from some of those challenges because, you will come out of those challenges better people for it or a better company for it.
So you're saying that you started with that tiny office, and you made this company, I'm going to say 15 years ago or so? So when was that?
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah. What was the decision? I mean, you must have made the decision to say, I'm now, because even back then, remote working was a thing. It's always been a thing. what was the decision to get an office? Like, what was the pull for that?
So the decision for me was more based around I didn't have a suitable home office space at the time.
Oh, okay.
So working from home wasn't really workable. I was able to work at the kitchen table, but then every day I'd have to
Yeah,
clear
yeah,
the table off and reset it the
sure.
next day. And then I had a team of people that I needed to meet with on a regular basis. So I was going to be spending as much on ad hoc meeting rooms hires uh, to have those in-person sessions as I was to just have the office space for everybody all the time. And at the same time, some of the other folk that I brought on, they also didn't have home office space either.
Mm. Right. Yeah. I mean, I guess that was probably a product of its time, though. I mean, given the COVID push, would those same decisions appear today? Because if you think we were all forced to get a home office 5 years ago, some more
Hmm.
successful than others, depending on your family situation. Um, but I know people who converted the spare bedroom into an office, or found a way of making it work, because when things closed down, I was talking to my brother about it, and he's in TV production, and they had to literally send equipment to people's houses, like mixing desks and for TV production, because they couldn't go into the office. The work still needed. I mean, TV shows still needed to be made and whatever. So people just found a way, and there's lots of apartments or flats in London now full of TV production equipment, because that's what they had to do. I mean, Stephen Colbert, I remember, he filmed his TV show in his basement, and his wife was the one holding the camera. So, so if you, I guess my point being, if you were to replay Barefoot today, would you still get that office if you were setting up Barefoot in 2025?
Probably with Barefoot, because it was a very local business. It was everybody worked together in Cork, so it was very easy to do. If I flip the question on to Key and Box, the decision there was very much to have it remote, and that started because well, the founding team was spread across 4 cities in 3 countries. So the founding team was remote, and as we brought on more team members to the business, the question
Even
was
more
what.
remote. I mean,
Yes, yeah,
our sales arm is in deepest, darkest Scotland. So,
yeah, yeah.
yeah,
But the question was, do we? I suppose it's a question for all startup founders. What are they after? Are they after that sense of teamwork in an office environment, or are they after the right person that might be remote? And in our particular case, we knew we had an individual that was keen to come onto the team, but there was no way that could have worked in a office situation. So we chose to go with that person rather than the office situation, because we really wanted to get them on board.
yeah, of course. Okay, interesting. Okay, I mean, on my side, the office story was very personal. 7, I think it was. I started a consultancy company with a business partner. He and I were both made redundant from the same company, and we decided to. He was my line manager, and we both decided to create a consultancy company. But because this was an office-based company that we were made redundant from, we just naturally happened to live within 5 or 10 minutes of each other. So our first office was, some days it was my living room, and some days it was his living room, and we kind of worked from home, and that worked fine when it was just the two of us. And we kept then onboarding other contractors, and they naturally were working from home, because freelancers just kind of work from home, and that's just what happens. Fast forward a couple of years, and I'd moved to Nottingham, and more developers I ended up hiring ended up being in Nottingham, and they were generally, some of them anyway, had just left university, so didn't have, literally like what you're describing, appropriate home working situations. I ended up getting a proper leased office, and I'm amazed I did it because I'm going to say mid-20s. I didn't really know what I was doing. And I got the fanciest office I could find, which was I got it for the wrong reason. It had a nice balcony overlooking the city. It was the wrong reason.
Nice.
It was very nice. And before anybody says anything, it was not investor funded, so I guess I paid for it myself. Which actually, on balance, I should have. I shouldn't have done that. But we ended up having a really nice office, and we ended up filling that office. It was, I'm going to say 10 people, 15, 20 people, around that. I'm not too sure. And it cost, thinking back now, £25,000 a year for the rent. And we're saying the numbers so we can think about, what made sense. And then when you added bills and everything else onto it, it was probably an extra 5 to 15K. I don't know if my old bookkeeper from back then is listening to this. Maybe you can tell me what the numbers actually were. And the reason I don't know the numbers is why I shouldn't have done it in the first place. Okay, I wasn't built for doing that. So the reason we did it was a couple of reasons. Number one, working from home just wasn't really working. We were meeting up in pubs and, as you say, hiring meeting rooms and whatever else. So it didn't really work out from that side. Also, I had a customer once come to meet me and made a comment as to why I didn't have an office. Because at that point, I had 10 members of staff all around the Nottingham city centre, so all within 5-10 minutes of each other, and no premises. And that was commented on. And I sort of thought to myself, if I want to be taken seriously as a consulting business, which is what we were at the time, I need an office. That was the reason. And actually, on balance, I probably should have pushed back on that person, because I don't know if having that office actually helped grow the company. What I could have done, and hindsight's a wonderful thing, could I instead have hired a small Regis, or WeWork didn't exist back then, but a small Regis, for 3 people, and if anybody struggled with working from home, that's a facility available to them.
Absolutely, that would have been a much better option.
That would have been a much better option. I would have saved a huge amount of money. Could have maybe hired another person. At the time, the way I justified it was a person. It was like hiring a person. That's how I justified the cost in my head. So it ended up being 40K. Let's just say 40K. That was the salary of a developer back then in Nottingham. So great. It was effectively a developer. Yeah, and that office ended up becoming a financial problem, obviously, because I ended up committing to like a 5-year lease, and then the landlord went bankrupt, so we got a new landlord, and the repairs weren't fixed, and it was all a bit of a mess. It's one of these fancy buildings that maybe wasn't built as well as it could have been.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was the reason for doing it. I was told by a customer, hey, you should probably do that, and I thought, okay, I should probably do that. I was mid-20s. I didn't know what I was talking about. So
yeah, I a similar scenario back in my early 20s. I was 20, maybe 21, when I set up the theatre production company. We didn't need an office. We needed a warehouse space to build scenery. We rented plenty of them as well. But for whatever reason, and I must catch up with Mark someday to find out, does he remember why? But I know there was ceremonial aspects, like we needed somewhere to put the plaque on the wall outside the door. Back in the day when you had plaques and rubber stamps, we even had a rubber stamp made up.
Rubber stamps, wow.
Yeah. But I remember we got the cheapest office we can, and I was only in a restaurant across the road from it the other day, looking out, going, what were we thinking? The floors weren't level, so you sort of had to walk downhill from the front window to the door. It's just weird, but it was cheap, so it worked for us. But then, going to all the way to the flip side, one of the best situations I had was my time at Simplivity, where we all joined and in an office situation. And, you talk about having that separation between a home and an office. So for me, I used to cycle into the office. It was a good hour-long cycle in
Wow.
and out in the evening. So it it gave me that forced exercise every day. Whereas in a home environment, going out for an hour cycle either side of the day just wouldn't happen. There would be, it's raining, I'm just not doing it or whatever. So, so I really did enjoy that aspect. And then working together with the team back in Simple Liberty, just fantastic, but it was an inside sales organization. So it made sense for everybody to be together in the one space. Yes, you can do that remote nowadays. I know plenty of people that are doing inside sales remotely, and it can work. But I also know there are plenty of people, they turn their laptop on at 8:30, 9:00, whatever starting time is, and they may not be out of bed. The cameras aren't on, but they're logged in and they're, answering emails and doing things. You know, it then forces companies to start putting oversight processes in place, to see what work is actually being done. Are they logging into calls and things like that? So I think certain roles, if your startup is going to need those roles, then it might be best off looking at an office from day one.
But you've just said though that because your team was all inside sales, you were in an office. I'm not in inside sales. Explain to me why. Okay, here's my understanding of inside sales. You're all got individual accounts. You're all working on the individual accounts. Why do you need to be together? What am I missing?
It's more from that shared learning. And I suppose I don't want to sort of paint this picture that every person working in inside sales is a junior role. There are plenty of really established, experienced inside sales operators, but a lot of the inside sales folk, especially in the IT space and the tech space, they tend to be first or second jobbers, maybe just out of college. And, at that age, we were that age at one time as well. We knew everything, but we also knew nothing at the same time. So, having colleagues there to be able to mentor with, to gain experience with, listening to the older, more experienced folk on the calls and things like that. You don't get that experience working from home. You will just carry on with your own methodology, whether it's right or wrong, because there's nobody there to help nurture you and coach you.
Okay, so that's our own experience as people who have built businesses, but we both have just come out of working at Realware. And Realware has an interesting story when it comes to offices, which is, yeah, they and I wasn't there when this happened, so if anyone at Realware knows, then please correct me. Their first office was in Silicon Valley, because that's where all tech companies are. And I visited that office, and it was a very nice building in Silicon Valley. I think it was a bit further outside, but still in that kind of Silicon Valley, let's call it catchment zone.
Yeah.
Then they moved up to the Portland, Vancouver way, and ended up having, was it 2 whole floors of this building? It was an old military fort. It was very grand. I think there were some great government tax incentives there, which explains it a little bit, which is okay. And that's what government's for. And then I think the goal was that they were going to hire in the full kind of Vancouver, Portland area, and that happened. And again, I wasn't there, but as I understand it, that happened. I'm going to say a year before COVID hit, maybe.
Yeah, pretty much.
Kind of early 2019, maybe late 2018, they had this office. And I think it kind of made sense that, 100, 150 people or so, whatever it was, ended up sort of descending on that Vancouver way and hiring from that bubble, which sounds on a much larger scale than what I was doing in Nottingham, but, growing the business from an area. They still had remote employees, being a global company, but the nucleus of the company was there. But then when COVID hit, it started to separate and disperse, as everybody ended up doing, and people would travel across the country. I think that's when I joined, and maybe when you joined as well. Sort of in that point when COVID was mid-flow, and therefore everybody was dispersed and further away. I don't know what the plan was regarding to return to work. I mean, there never was an official policy, I think, laid out. I know people talked about it, but never really. What ended up happening, though, and I'm guessing I'm getting to the point now, is the office went from being a place of socialization to tumbleweed.
Yeah.
And there were so many times throughout the 3-4 years that I worked at Realware, when I went to the office, and maybe this was your experience as well. And the office, just for the audience, did start to shrink because, they realized, hey, we don't need 2 floors now, and we don't need all these things. As it started to shrink, we then ended up in this place where it was tumbleweed, and it went from being this sociable hub of when everybody was there to a very weird place to be because, well, it just was. Now, Realware didn't enforce a return to office policy and ended up, I don't know whether, do they still have the office now? I don't know if they still do.
They have a office.
Okay. I mean, you hear about companies that start to enforce a kind of return to office policy. Yeah. So everybody dispersed, and now they're now they're coming back. Knowing what you know about Realware, having obviously worked there, and then we could talk about other businesses as well, would a return to office policy have actually worked if they had decided to have done
that? No, would be the short answer. I suppose, let me paint the picture. Back in 2019, it was a hub. It was a vibrant, bustling environment. You had finance were in the building, marketing were in the building, HR was there. You had sales downstairs, you had logistics and, operations. It was a hub, a busy hub. It was a fantastic experience to be able to walk around, and yet the meeting room as well. So you could have big, team sessions as well. When everybody left as part of COVID, one of the challenges was a lot of people who had moved to the area to work retreated back to where their original home was because they could. So, somebody that had been living and working in the office in Vancouver is now back in Colorado or Fort Lauderdale or other places like that. A work from the office mandate would have forced them to move state in a lot of cases again, and they just wouldn't have done it. They'd have looked at other roles elsewhere, would be my guess. The other thing that happened was, a lot of the decision making around our new hires, because of COVID, we had decentralized, we'd moved everything remote. We hired people remote. So the marketing team originally was all based out of Vancouver, but after COVID, they were globally spread. So you can't have a return to the office scenario when you've hired somebody in the Netherlands and the UK and, Denmark. It's just not going to happen.
No. I mean, in Europe, Realware being a US company, the European team were naturally distributed because they were generally, maybe I was the exception to the rule at the beginning, but generally sales. No? Go on.
You may not be aware of this, but we actually did have a office in the Netherlands. Before you moved to the Netherlands,
I thought that was just an address. I thought that was just a post box.
We actually had an office with desks and chairs, and some of the other folk that are based in the Netherlands, they were not expected. It hadn't got to the point where they were told they had to go into the office, but the office space was available for them to go in. And that was back in 2019. Obviously, that nobody ever went into it, so we eventually downsized it to just a postal address. But the intent was there to have a physical office for people working out of.
Okay. Okay. I question that decision then, because as a Dutch employee of Realware, I wasn't even aware that we had an office there. And maybe it closed down by then, or when was it closed?
It downsized probably late 2020.
Okay, fine. Yeah, I joined as a Dutch employee January 22. Okay, all right, fair play. Um, but I guess, as a company of, let's say, US nucleus with a distributed sales team, it didn't make sense. Although obviously I was corrected, to have an office outside of the Netherlands. Sorry, Netherlands, outside of the US. But yeah, I agree. A return to work would not have made sense at Real. I'm glad they didn't do that, even though it wouldn't have affected you or me. But I think of some of like the developers or support team or whatever else having that wouldn't have really worked. And I think it would have just created chaos because, as you say, people naturally drifted apart. You can't, once the cat's out the bag, that's it. So I've got an interesting story for you then. So obviously we've talked about RealWare. Starbucks. Starbucks, of course, did a remote.
My favorite hybrid office.
Yeah. Well, okay, there we go. Yeah, very true. So Starbucks has changed its policy to work from the office. That 4 days a week in the office now for all of its corporate staff. Corporate managers, listen to this, must relocate to Seattle or Toronto. Must. Interesting. And non-compliant staff are offered a voluntary exit with cash. Doesn't sound very voluntary to me, but
No,
okay.
Not.
But hang on, here's the kicker. The CEO continues to work remotely because that's what's in his contract.
No. So if you're going to impose policies like that, you need to lead from the front.
Yeah. No surprise. That is an unpopular decision. The thing is, the question I guess that I don't understand, and that's what we need to discuss, is what's the motivation there? Because I heard that one motivation for asking people to come back to the office is we, the company, have paid for the office, therefore you must use it. But that feels like the wrong reason for people to work in the office, because it's not the staff's decision to have bought that office. That they didn't buy the land or build the building or, and surely productivity should be the goal of getting people into the office. But I don't know. What do you agree with me? Do you think that's their reasoning, or?
I think it's a very naive reasoning. I've given it Starbucks. It's an interesting statement.
Yeah.
I think as an employer, you've got to look at what are you expecting to get out of your employees by bringing them into the office. If productivity is going to increase, then it's a sound decision. But it can't be made on its own, because you're now changing from having your employees being able to, drop their kids to school in their home village and, be back working within 10, 15 minutes, and often the case, to often having to drop their kids to early childhood centres before school, and then an hour's commute into the office, all of that. You now have your team coming in a little bit jaded, a little bit resentful. It was so much better before, and, are you going to get as much productivity? And maybe there is the hybrid solution. 3 days a week might work.
Yeah.
If you're going to make the hybrid approach, it needs to be the same 3 days. If you're bringing people in to get the productivity and all of that, it doesn't make sense to have folk coming in and out at their own decision. Everybody comes in these 3 days, or everybody's in all the time.
Yeah, and I think the sting though is the fact that the CEO has got his own rules, and also, I'm looking here on my other screen. According to the CEO Brian Nicol, we do our best work when we're together, and we share ideas more creatively. Effectively, creativity solves hard problems, and we move much faster. Okay, very nice. He gets a corporate jet,
so his commute is not that troublesome.
His commute is comfortable, and that's very nice. I think also the irony of that, Starbucks historically has welcomed people working in their coffee shops. As you say, it's your hybrid office. Starbucks is quite a nice place to work, especially there are some Starbucks. There's one in there's 100 in London, but there's one in London. Let me think now. Near St. Paul's, which has a downstairs area with some sofas. And every time I've been there, it's been very quiet. Headphones on, laptop out, get some work done. It's good for like 1 or 2 hours. Great. Love it. And I'm not kind of taking the piss because I'm buying a coffee. You know, I'm not sitting there abusing their goodwill. Yeah, that's really strange. I think, though, there are definitely some people who like the idea of being in the office. And for that return to work order, that makes a lot of sense. But like, if you've moved away, you know, you're being forced to relocate. And look, Seattle and Toronto, they are not cheap cities to move to, especially if, you know, you moved away for financial reasons or family. Although you're pointing about childcare, there's so many things that kind of affect that decision. Now, are you familiar, though, for those people who do come in, with the concept of coffee badging?
Coffee badging? No.
Coffee badging. So a number of these companies, so let's take the Starbucks. They say you need to come into the office 4 days a week. Okay, great. How do they know that? Well, a lot of companies now are looking at your swipes. When you come into the building, you swipe your card.
Yeah.
So this concept of coffee badging has appeared, whereby you swipe your badge in the morning, you grab a coffee, and then you go back home. And yep, it's a thing. It's a thing. And it's basically like a kind of quiet protest against these kind of return to office things. Because yeah, I've obviously completely nameless. I have a friend who does this. And, you know, they are required to be in the office for so many days a week. I don't think it's 4. I think it's less. But, you know, so and he lives quite far away. So, you know, there's a bit of coffee badging going on. There's also a cheekier version, which is lend your badge to one of your colleagues and they swipe for you. How does anyone know? But that just makes it really. I don't know. I think from the company side, obviously, that's just abusing the system. From the employee side, if they are able to be productive and hit their KPIs, which at the end of the day, that's all that really matters.
All that should matter, yeah.
Maybe that's just proof that this whole return to office thing is just BS.
Well, I think for any employer, that you've got to look at it from the employee side as well. You know, it is so much easier to retain staff than it is to hire good staff. So it has to be, the employees need to be wanting to come into work. There has to be some value to being in the office for them. If it's purely to tick a box that they've been in the office, no value, you know, and that's where that whole concept of coffee badging stems from, it seems. No value to the employees. They're going in to tick some arbitrary KPI that so many people are in the office. A waste of time. If it's that they go in for a Monday meeting and they don't get any value from that meeting, then again they're going to be going, what's the point going into the office? And they will all start looking elsewhere. You know, they'll be on looking at different roles, maybe closer to them, less commute, maybe remote working. You know, they will look for ways to get what they need out of the job and not what the company needs out of them.
Yeah. Okay. So where you're sitting then, you're obviously setting up a new startup, as am I. From your side, are you very much in the kind of remote or hybrid role? Do you think in the future of Key and Box there's an office in the sites, or, you know, where do you sit in this debate?
We are going to stay hybrid. When I say hybrid, I mean completely remote. Right, our focus is on hiring the right people, regardless of their location. And as long as they can do the work and hit the metrics that we need, I don't care where they are.
So, but is that not a contradiction to what you said? On the point about the inside salespeople being in an office and how that was really useful, or do you think you think your outlook on that has changed over time?
I think if we were building an inside sales organization, then yes, I would look to putting that in one location. We would identify a suitable office space, and then we would hire the inside sales folk in that area to be in the office. But that's because that function, the inside sales function, makes sense in an office environment. I think
Okay.
it's much better for that. But the functions that we need, they don't need to be all together.
Yeah. Okay. No, I agree. I think on my side, I miss going into an office sometimes, but I can't escape the reality that all the people I work with are just naturally remote from where I live. And if I think about it, I'm in the Netherlands, but I work a lot with people in the UK, and of course yourself in Ireland. Although I guess you kind of just hop between the two places. I wouldn't know where I would place an office. Like, I like the idea of an office, but I wouldn't know where I'd place it. And yeah, that doesn't really make sense. So I don't know what I'm saying. I don't know what, like, I like going in an office, but practically that's not really possible based on the companies that I'm currently involved with, unless they get to 100 people. But I don't know. It might happen. I can't see it.
Yeah, so I'm thinking back to our last conversation with Jan, where Jan Yonkers, they formed their business by the founding team coming together and brainstorming, coming up with all of those ideas. And I'm thinking back to some of the leadership offsites that we had. When I say offsite, in our situation, and especially at Railware, it was more on-site because we were all offsite all the time, and we were going on-site for the offsite.
I agree.
And we all got together, be that in the office in Vancouver, which was a costly exercise to fly us all from all across the globe to Vancouver, but we also did it in Switzerland and different locations. Those sessions were some of the best sessions that I've been part of at my time at Railware, where we were able to brainstorm, we were able to work productively throughout the day, we were able to have lunch together, and we were immersed for a period of time, and we came away with some really good action plans from those sessions. So if I was to do it again, not with Canebox because the program doesn't suit it, but I would still consider an office-based startup. I think there's a lot to be said.
Yeah.
And I spent a lot of time in the WeWorks across the globe. One of the things I love about those is there's different people at different stages of their startup journey. And, as an individual startup business, to be able to catch up with somebody, over a coffee and learn from them and understand what the pains and challenges they went through, you wouldn't get that if you were working from home. So if I was starting up my own startup again, I would probably look at having an office in a WeWork.
Given that you're a startup enthusiast, I'm not sure starting again if I think it's when.
It's when.
I think from your perspective, yeah, I think I've been talking to some of the people I work with, and in this new venture, we're going to establish a once a quarter meetup for the company, no matter whereabouts in the world you are, because I remember the first year I worked at Railware, I joined in, I'm going to say the April of 21. I didn't actually meet any of my colleagues until February of 22, which was weird. Now, that was deep in COVID, so that's just the way it was. But I remember feeling a great sense of camaraderie meeting my colleagues for the first time. And then a few months after that, I don't know if you remember that sales summit in Vancouver, when I felt like the whole company descended on Vancouver for a summit, and I really felt like I was part of the company at that point. Until then, I was sort of on the outside. So I think that having a quarterly meetup for the company is very important because there's no office. And I don't know if those intense sessions are going to make up for the fact that there's no permanent office. But to your point about those off-sites that became on-sites, I think that's kind of what you're describing as well. Whether that's a replacement or it's just fitting in the structure that you've just created, you are naturally remote, therefore get everyone together. I think no matter what you do, whether it's office or hybrid, you still need to meet at some point.
Correct.
So shout out to Revolut for giving WeWork passes with some of their tiers, because I have certainly used those, and well, okay, I think we've taught this one to death. So
yes, and it's those Revolut passes benefited. I benefited from them too.
yeah, I used it a few weeks ago. Yeah, absolutely. All right, what are we going to talk about next time? I don't know. Shall we do what we did this time and just decide half an hour before that what we're going to talk about?
Yeah, let's give that a rattle. It seemed to work today.
It seemed to work fine. Okay, good. All right. Well, thanks to the listener for tuning in. That's really great. We are now on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts, which is great. This one will be uploaded very shortly, which will be quite exciting. We've actually uploaded them in a bit of a strange order, really. I think we've uploaded episodes 1, 2, and then we skip forward to number 8. So there's a bit of a back catalogue of 3 to 7 that are still lurking in the editing suite. So I think, though, given that we did this one in one take, I think I'm just going to put this one up now.
Fair enough.
And yeah, we'll backfill the others as and when we get to it. But yeah.
Do we need to caveat the first couple of recordings, first couple of sessions are not our finest work. They do get better. So
they're not. I think like unlike fine wine, those first episodes definitely do not get better with age. But that's okay. Look, I think we'll just trip them out as and when we can. I think at least we now know where the recording button is, which is very good.
Exactly.
Yeah,
awesome
stuff. All right. Well, thanks very much. I'll see you soon.
Take care, everybody. Bye.
Cheers. Bye.